So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the last of our global chats for this year. I could be getting sad and a little bit of tears at the end of what's been an extraordinary experience this year with some phenomenal guests. And so, with a strong anchor, no pressure, Michael's joining us from Workday today to share insights around innovation in the space of leadership development. Before we hand over to him as our guest, thank you all for joining us today. All you need is your good selves, a pen, a piece of paper, capture notes as you go through. A recording will be made available afterwards. And I'm Mark, VP of Sales and Delivery for the Jump Shift and Adaption team over here in New Zealand. Corey, say hi and then tag in Michael.
Hi, everyone. So great to see some new faces and some familiar faces. I'm Chief Leadership Officer for Americas, and I am delighted to have Michael with us. Michael, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Corey. Hi, everyone. I'm Michael Campbell. I have a great role at a great organization. So I get to oversee leadership development at Workday. And so thrilled to be part of this learning community, and great to see some names. So shout out Carrie and Judith. Good to see your names and everything. It's been a while.
Awesome. And this is meant to be interactive as we go. We've got a few things to help with that. For those technologically challenged, don't worry, QR barcode scanning shouldn't be the thing that puts you off. You can also type in using two fingers what is our Mentipoll website address in a little moment. And also the Zoom chat at the bottom of your screen. As you think of questions you'd love to ask Michael, feel free to pop them into the chat or hold them to unmute later. There'll be an opportunity to chime in with your questions. And if any of those questions we don't get to, just to be really respectful of the hour of time that we all have here today, then we'll do our best to get Michael to create some reflections and share them after for any of the questions that we miss. So, Corey, I know we love our rapid fire section. It always puts our guests on their toes and has them fun with them right early. So over to you for the rapid fire section.
Okay, I would love that. Michael, what do you love best about your work?
Boy, just the teammates, like just the sheer like performance talent of the people I get to work with every day. That's something I love.
If you weren't doing this, what would you be doing?
I think I would be like teaching. So I don't know. In the back of my mind, I've always wanted to kind of teach the next generation of leadership development professionals. So that might be something I'd be doing instead.
What about something not on your resume?
I think it's like one of the fun ones I got to do. Like I grew up in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and there's not like a lot of like big movie scene, kind of there or anything like that. But one time there was this total B movie. It's called D. Schneider's Strangeland, and we got to be extras in that and everything. And I actually met Linda Cardellini. So she's big time now and everything. But at the time, we were just some kids just having conversation and things like that, sitting and watching things get set up. So that's kind of a fun one.
That's totally cool. I've known you for a while and I didn't know that. That's new for me. Okay, what about a nickname you were known by and where it originated?
My name, Michael Campbell, MC. So I get a lot of MC call outs and things like that. It just kind of like organically grew and things like that. So I probably get that called more so than Michael nowadays.
Okay. What about your newest go-to app on your phone?
Oh man. I don't know if I go like newest. I've been playing with the shortcuts app on iPhone. So like when I get excited, like I drive up to 24-hour fitness and it pops up, like my, app and things like that. So maybe that's one I've been playing with.
Okay. What about your best tip for overcoming jet lag? I know you've done some traveling over the years. What's your best tip?
Yeah, it's funny. I was we were doing a session with David Rock, if you're familiar with David and his work, and we just got on this side tangent of like how to get over jet lag, and everyone like leaned in like that's something I really want to hear and everything. And so he said, never be hungry, so always be eating, which isn't a problem for me. And he said, you're going to get 5 hours of sleep. Make sure it's the right 5 hours of sleep. So if you're going to know you're going to wake up at 3 a.m., try to stay up later and get that 5 hours so that you're waking up closer to when you wanted to wake up in the first place. So those are 2 quick tips.
Okay, love that. And then final rapid fire question. What are you reading or listening to right now?
For work, I started reading this book called Thinking in Bets. We're doing a lot of work around decision making, and so this kind of felt like a unique take. So it's someone who studied to be kind of a org psychologist and instead decided to be a professional poker player, and so how you make decisions and things like that. So yeah, it's super interesting so far.
It's great. I've heard about that one, but I haven't read it. You're inspiring me to pick it up. All right. So, Michael, we're here to talk about compelling and personalized leadership development, or in your words, we love this from our prep call with you, delivering experiences that people love. What's something that you thought would be necessary to do that actually turned out to be false?
So, like I grew up through like a leadership development school that had like a very like specific formula around leadership development programs, and when I was putting together programs, particularly like younger, you would take these designs and you would take them to someone more senior, and they would review them and let you know, if they were good, and so they would say, does it have a personality assessment, a 360, and feedback? And if so, you're great. Whatever you do after that is perfectly fine. And so, like, I really felt like assessments just they seem to be like less important, or like the amount of assessments that I do in leadership development now, or the things that we do and recommend. And like I use the term crowbars. Like a good assessment is like a crowbar that pops the lid off of a great conversation, and that's ultimately what you're trying to get at is that. And so I think just rethought what we need in terms of the types of assessments. And the second thing is like more content. Like anything, we need less content. We need to be saying a lot less to our people to help them do their jobs and do them well. And so we've been doing a lot of work of saying, like, how could we cut this down to the bare essentials. So another thing that has been a popular read over here at Workday in our area, called Smart Brevity, and really sort of like, how do we get at the essence of what we want to say in a very structured way. So we have been like trying to eliminate a lot of content that we as like learning and development and kind of that group love. Like we think everyone loves it as much as we do, and they don't. They just need the essentials. So those are 2 things that are like things that we've tried to move away with, and really get at like, how do leaders think, and let's talk about real problems and everything. We don't need a ton of frameworks to do that. We can get into it.
Fantastic. I'm looking forward to getting into that more with you. But before we do that, I'm going to hand to Mark to tap into wisdom from this crowd who've joined us.
Beautiful. And smart brevity. I need to leverage that in everything that I do. Thank you for that already, Michael. So Menti poll time, opportunity, as I say, 2-finger type to pop it in, or for the flash ones amongst us, QR barcode scan should drop you into Menti. And once you're there, you can just enter the code 16087670. Devin, if you can capture those 2, just in case anyone arrives late to the call, which just happens sometimes, so that they can continue not to have a sense of loss, but to be able to join us. That would be amazing if that's okay. As we go through, there's a chance I've just varied up where are you dialing in from. I recognize as you do this next screen, you will obliterate part of the world with a big blue dot. It won't quite capture exactly where you are versus what we had before, but I thought it'd be visually a little bit more attractive than what we've done, and I've got bored with it. So time to mix it up. So drop your pins where you are, get a bit of a sense who's dialing in from where, and hopefully your part of the world is captured here without me putting the entire globe up. Unless there's someone dialing in from Iceland or somewhere. We'll see. So nice. These are coming through thick and fast. Dots all over the place. New islands in the sea that I didn't even know existed. Beautiful. Keep those coming. And what we've got is 3 key questions, and then also some of your own ideas and insights to share. We'll reflect back out on the responses to the big 3 questions, and then we'll get your inputs, hopefully, on your own thinking around innovative solutions that you've been experimenting with in your organization. So here goes the kind of how's it at your place, gauge the temperature. My organization delivers learning experiences that are compelling and personalized. My organization continually refreshes how they develop employees, staying current with development trends. My organization provided me with relevant quality development in the past 6 months. So strongly disagree to strongly agree. Let us know how you roll, and then we'll get some reflections from Corey, Michael, myself at the appropriate time once the scores have settled live on the screen. If you're self-employed and you haven't been provided with relevant quality development, have a chat with yourself, sort that out. So just as these scores start to settle in, Michael, Corey, any immediate reflections from what you see, comments, commentary you'd like to share at this point?
I'll jump in on a couple. I think like personalized is interesting. I think sometimes that can be interpreted as like made for me. I think it's also personalized when you think about like you're building support for the jobs to be done by a certain group and everything, and making that easier for them. And so, that's one of the ways that we've been thinking about personalized. And then continually refreshes how they develop employees is interesting, because I think like a lot of it stays the same. You know what I mean? Like some things are new and some things but we've been on a scan of like how are people like really doing development of employees like really differently. And I can say there's only like maybe 1 or 2 things that have made us like raise our eyebrows and say that feels like really different and has got us interested.
Excellent. Any builds, Corey, from your perspective?
Yeah, Michael, I'm interested. So that the comment you made on personalized and just that tension between and providing, not overwhelming people with a lot of content. So how do you get after personalized and keeping it simple and brief?
Yeah, and I think again, like the depends on like the audience. Like I'll do the lens of like what we're doing in manager effectiveness, for example, for those in case it's helpful, is like, personalized, like these, they've spent time understanding what my job and what I have to do is each and every day. And like, they're helping me do that in a way that is adding value to what I do and stuff. And so I think that's one way that you help manage that tension, is you do the work on the front end to really understand like what that leader is going through each and every day.
Paul, and my only comment, ironically, is around the third question, where I've certainly in the last 6 months put a request in for some development that was quite subject matter specialist outside of what our organization does as its bread and butter. So it was a sales training program that I was interested in doing, and I looked to source it. So I've only got myself to blame. Heard really good things. There was some really good content, but it wasn't that powerfully facilitated. So even though I selected the development from the organization I wanted to do it with on the topic that was important to me, it still didn't quite deliver the way that I thought would really unlock my skills and performance. And so it's actually hard, even when buyer can make those choices. It's still difficult to select stuff that will really make a difference, because there's what it says on the tin and then there's what actually happens, and they can be 2 different things. So I'm interested to hear from everyone on this call. You're all experienced in different ways. You've either been on leadership development that works, or you're designing it for your organization or clients. What are your own top tips for or things that you're doing around development initiatives that are in those 1 or 2 category that Michael referenced, where his eyebrows went up, that you're doing something different? You're exposing your leaders to something and experimenting in a slightly different way. So be, what was the right word? Smart brevity is required in Menti, because they're short answers anyway. but just try and capture the essence of what was different, what have you tried, and we'll get a little bit of a round poll again from Michael and Corey before we move on. I'm wondering if ET is extraterrestrial engagement. Fascinated as to that one. Definitely got my eyebrows raised.
That was me, Mark, executive team.
Thank you.
It made more sense when they were capitalized.
It's like, wow, we're going out of this world literally for innovation that way. Beautiful. Some really nice, succinct reflections. Yeah, back to basics. Sometimes I've heard that from like black belt senseis. There's all this fancy stuff you can do, and sometimes it's about going back to the core. Same in weight training or fitness, rather than doing all the fancy exercises, going back to the basics of biceps, triceps, legs, and back. That's it, rather than getting all flash with these pulley systems and everything else. So, Michael, Corey, reflections as you see some of these innovative approaches coming in? BR, I like that one.
I know. Michael, I'm curious, which of these are you leveraging at Workday? Which are the top ones?
So definitely, thinking about back to the basics. So this idea of tools and templates for managers is one that we're like super simple, but like super practical, are things that are like not on like the super sexy side of like learning and development, but are like like totally meeting the need. And then artificial intelligence. Like we're working with a vendor now that's got us interested because like imagine rather than going to like a course or like an e-course on let's say you want to get better at decision making, you say what's the best stuff we've got on decision making, and you're able to like come back and give you like sort of like chat GPT like advice and insights and things like that. And so we're just like it blew us away when we kind of saw that potential and opportunity, and it's like really hard to actually like execute and operationalize and everything. So we're at like the total beginning of that journey.
Very good. Corey, any other reflections as you look through from what you see there?
No, I want to get into some of the other things Michael talked about earlier.
Beautiful, done.
Mark,
I'm often with you, mate. Often with you. Go.
Okay. So, Michael, I was really engaged just in you talking about Workday being innovative in its approach. I giggled a bit when you talked about initial kind of training on it's a 360 plus a personality assessment plus feedback. You and I got our start at Center for Creative Leadership, which had a lot of does bring a lot of benefit. And you found some different approaches. We talked about this a little bit already, but how do you get in touch with the leaders that you're trying to serve to make sure that it is the right content to get at that personalized piece? And then also, like, what have you found in terms of delivering that content effectively?
Yeah. So I think what has worked for us is, to really try to find a handful of people that are like out on the fringes doing different stuff. So these groups are great, for new ideas, and there are those individuals out there that are thinking about like what else and what's next. And so friend of Adeption and friend of Workday, Nick Petrie, is one that like we rely on, of just like, so what's out there that we're not doing and what we're thinking about. And so he brought he was doing some work with the late Anders Ericsson, who was a researcher on the science of expertise, and was kind of provocative in like saying like, I think leadership measurements, ridiculous, and you're not actually really doing anything and measuring it. And so he said like, well, how would you do it, and what would you do differently? And so we did partner with Anders, and what ended up we created was this really cool way of getting out of the heads of executives. What is it that their mental models and how they're really thinking about things? And we use this, it's super simple, but really helpful technique of like, walk us through your decisions, like in a really specific way, and then tell us like what someone that's novice or less effective would have done in that situation. And it creates these sort of like two anchor points of how you would look at that. Now, how that sort of became personalized is that, we use this way of asking leaders certain questions to get like this information, unpack all of this stuff. And so in Workday in particular, like the different functions just do operate differently. So when we have obviously our products and technology, like have some very specific challenges that they face and they deal with, they're going to look different from our go-to-market. And so one of the examples of things that emerged out of this was this idea of like in technology, sometimes you'll have two products and they both kind of do the same thing, and you have to decide what you're going to do with one and which one you're going to unwind. And it's not just like a business decision, but there's like people decisions that are all associated with this. And so we're able to capture like these really sort of specific mental models and representations of like how really senior leaders think about this. And then we're able then in a programmatic way to deliver that for individuals to understand like, well, if I'm in like products and tech, like I'm not thinking at that level, right? So how do I operate and do that? Now, the kind of the most basic principle we've gotten of like delivered effectively, and that was Workday thing, or like it's just always with high achiever organizations, but like competitive is always engaging. And so we convert almost everything we do into some type of competition. And so in this case, what we did is we took all of these stories and we built them into essentially was sort of like a board game that would use sort of like gamified case studies. And so everyone has to make these decisions, and the decisions are like evaluate like what would a novice do, what did an actual Workday leader do, and what sort of like might be in the middle there. And so it's this competitive, it's fun, but at the end of the day, you can start to draw conclusions around how do you think at this level when you got this kind of job versus sort of this level, and what's that gap? And now let's talk about like, how would you close that and how would you grow in that way? So that's one example of like, look what's happening at the fringe, work with like real experts if you can, and then totally make it like competitive and fun in terms of the learning experience.
Michael, that's fascinating. Are senior leaders interested in their own like themes that are coming across in terms of how they're making decisions?
It's really interesting to watch them walk through, because like they don't actually, and probably ask yourselves, like, when was the last time you sort of like reflected but really took like the step by step through a decision, what worked, what didn't work, what were you evaluating, what mistakes you made, and like at the end of it, how did we ultimately get the outcome that we wanted? And so it does end up being developmental for them in a lot of ways, because as they've unpacked that, they now have a lesson that that's in front of them, and sometimes they didn't realize that was there until you've actually had the conversation with them.
I love that. We have a B3 model that it sounds like you've deep dived on, in terms of the first B being be conscious, like wake up all the senses, but more than just the high level run through the steps you went through. Exactly what were you thinking, feeling, doing, assessing, evaluating at every single stage? Because there's almost the automated response to a survey versus what I actually do in real life. There's a globally renowned research company called Hathaway that always talked about, you can't interview people to find out what they did. You have to do observational feedback, reflection, and capturing of the behaviors, because what they say they did and what they actually did are two different things. And so Interested in all of that, but I'll move on to the next question. You're a tech company, obviously focused on HR enterprise applications. How do you guys leverage technology internally to measure the impact of leadership development programs for yourselves?
Yeah, well, we're super lucky. So, as a Workday's in the business of, HR enterprise applications. And so we just have like a ton of data. And we've got like really innovative things around measuring engagement and getting that information, as well as like internally, like we just have an absolute top-notch people analytics group of data scientists and as well that really understand data and meaning behind that. And so our journey is probably not unlike everyone else's in like, I would wake up in a cold sweat at the idea that at some point our COO is going to come down and say, how do you know all this stuff is making a difference anyway whatsoever? And so what we did is first you start off with a point of view. And we were doing some work around what is expected of a people leader at Workday. So I'll use this as an example of how we're measuring. And once we defined that, we worked with our data scientist group to say, how would we know if this is happening within the organization? And we decided rather than to measure, like, did going through X program experience produce X result, to say, like, let's just measure overall, like, what's happening. Are these things that we see are really important happening within an organization? And then you start at like this overall macro view of like here's what's happening. And then you start clicking into different organizations. And then we can start looking at like bright spots and hot spots. And so when you get a hot spot and you say, why is this lower in this area for this person? So let's take, for example, career conversations are not happening at the same frequency in this organization as in other organizations. Well, now we can engage in a conversation around that. And then the other part of the puzzle is we can look at program usage and say, well, we have enablement that supports that. How many of your leaders are actually gone through that? And now when we come to that, let's say it's lower than what we might expect, we can come up with like a really specific strategy and say, we can go in there right now and deliver some training and enablement and set the expectation of this, and let's see like how that impacts this particular measure after that's delivered. And so rather than because there's so many dynamics, right, like of chasing your tail of like okay, did they take action on this particular thing? Instead we've got the opportunity, or at least we're trying and experimenting with this, is like, let's see what we think should happen if people were all sort of doing what we think are the right things to do. And if not, rather than go broad spectrum, we can go like really focused in, help that particular area, and then see what the impact is.
Love that. Yeah, there's a friend of ours partnering with Nick at Novartis a while ago who'd been asked to measure the impact, lead and lag behaviors and all that stuff. And they took a similar approach, an ecosystem approach to going, what are all the data points? It was challenging because there was about 15 different data pools that they were drawing on. And then they went, and what are we noticing? Hotspots and opportunities, and then go explore. Because, the natural tendency is, did this program deliver this outcome for these leaders? Instead of what's going on, and let's find out and interrogate it. Almost like your interview approach with the execs, right? Let's find out what you do through a decision-making process and then drill into that with you to find out what's going on in your thinking that sits underneath it. Back over to you, Corey.
Wonderful, thanks. So Michael, Workday has grown tremendously. You guys are what, 1.5 times the size that you were just even a couple of years ago. I'm assuming that you weren't able to grow your team by the same amount. So a couple questions in here, right? Number one is, how did you continue to scale personalized people leader effectiveness when you can't grow your team at the same rate? And then there was a great question in the chat about how do you personalize at scale? And is there a piece in there about how to encourage self-directed learning so not everything has to come from you and your team?
Yeah, so I'll tell the story again of what we found ourselves, so we had gone through, let's go pre-pandemic first. So we had a very popular, innovative 3-day experience that all new managers went through as part of their joining Workday, and really focused on like, what are those fundamental things that you need to do. And then when the pandemic hit, all like in person obviously had gone away. And so then we had to like quickly virtualize that content. And just, like of the opportunities or insights that you get out of that, like you're forced to do something new, and it got us exploring, sort of different areas. Well, after the pandemic, super hyped, let's get back to doing, in-person leadership development. And we went down that path and for manager effectiveness. And then we started to, get people were out, in terms of our facilitators. And so like it just became this really resource constrained thing. And then we couldn't get enough people through the program fast enough because there were like so many people going, then you get like these long wait lists. And so we didn't exactly know what to do. And we had come across it was funny enough, a job description. It was over at Meta, and the job description was like scale leadership development. And we said, that's what we need. We got to scale manager effectiveness. But what does that actually look like, and what would we actually do? So first thing, we were able to, couldn't hire any more facilitators, but we did have an open headcount, and we hired someone specifically for that role. And so, as always, you get the right person in, makes everything easier. Second is that we made the unpopular decision of sunsetting that in-person program, and really thought about the overall 12-month experience of someone coming in. So the idea of like really being empathetic to that person and understanding like, what do they need when, and how do we deliver that just in time and signal the fact that they're going to get what they need when they need it. And that's, again, when you think about personalization, it's the idea that like, I'm about to go and do this thing. The organization is asking me to go and assess performance, for example. Well, how do you do that at Workday? What are the things that, that you need to do? What are the technical aspects of that? You're going to get that, right when you need it. And so now that we've, this was a whole year of building out those systems, making sure that we, we're able to provide that information, that enablement to those managers. And again, like, do people want that in-person like experience? Yes. But we had to take the picture of like, this is what we can do with given the scale that we're facing. And this is the way that we can, reassure people they're going to have the enablement they need when they need it. So at the end of that 12 months, they have really gone through an entire cycle of the things that they need to be like based on what we expect of all of our managers here at Workday.
Michael, that's a phenomenal example. What about this piece around self-directed? How much is delivered by you and your team, and how do you encourage people to lean into peer connect or, driving their own development?
Yeah, we haven't figured it out. Like, so and I've been, anyone on the line, correct me if you've got this, but I feel like we're chasing this continuous learning kind of dream of like learn in the flow of work. And I think if each of us looked at our own selves, we would say like, that's not how we do things, right? Like, we've got to get some work done. And if we're lucky, we hit the pause button and we think about what that might be, or we look for the learning that we need, when we need it. And so I think what you find is that those who are like really self-motivated are already looking at, something new and out there. And, and I think, sometimes when we've been finding too, is that people who are like looking for new opportunities are also tend to be maybe less engaged. And so then that becomes a problem too, right? Because if there's something about the work that's not engaging, that becomes an issue as well that you're dealing with. And so this is where I think like, the generative AI being able to get someone that's sort of like explaining to you, through that process, in the same way that we consume like any kind of like we're looking up something on any other type of information that we get. Like, I think that's going to be the game changer for this idea of self-directed learning and approaching that in a different way. Because no one ever talks about the great e-course that they went through, but they do talk about the books that they read or the podcasts that they listened to and things like that. So I'm more and more figured like this may be just some nirvana that we can't reach, and we need to think about it in a different way, or really look at like when the technology catches up with that ability to get answers that you need in a much more efficient way.
Thanks, Michael.
Not
Mark,
sure
what are you
quite how
curious
to.
about?
Yeah, not quite sure how to ask this, but like generative AI could change the game. Is there anything else that you've come across or explored that'd also be in your top three?
In terms of exploration, I'll tell you a little bit about the journey that we were on. So we were looking at and said, we're going to do like some manager and leadership development at scale, like who's doing great stuff out there. And every time we went and we talked to someone, inevitably, like every other conversation, they put up the slide up that was like, okay, we're going to do this 10-phase leadership development experience, and here's what happens in phase 1, and here's what happens in phase 2 and phase 3, and it was like, this isn't going to work. Like we have just seen like participation, interest, all of this like declines as you go through this, and so it didn't like capture our imagination. It didn't get us excited about anything. So that's kind of doesn't answer your question, Mark, at all. But like we didn't like stumble across that in any sort of compelling way. So I talked a little bit about the idea of like knowledge management through generative AI. The other thing that like I think was fun and interesting, we've been struggling with like, can you make virtual reality, augmented reality work in learning and development? And like there's a whole barrier around like equipment and things like that, hardware that you have to have. And this is like such a simple thing, but we participated in a game, and it was just like experiential exercises you may have done like in a classroom or something like that. Like put this puzzle together, but it's really hard and you have to collaborate. This was all done in virtual reality, and I was just so impressed that the technology was there to like make it feel seamless. But as always, the best part of it was the debrief, and you had this great person debriefing the experience, unpacking things, making you talk about real issues. So again, it's like these means to an end of that. But I got to again, like I know Adeption's hosting this, is that we have found that like the platform, in particular platform coaching. So when we get people on the system and our ability to pop in, provide like, here's a quick note, here's a link, we're finding not only like our learning and development people are in there and getting into it, but our what we call people consultants. So those people, the team that always has to deal with like the kind of the toughest situations and things like that, or taking tickets and everything, they're in there and they're like seeding things. And so it's also providing an opportunity for us to tap into like a bigger community of like expertise to help serve leaders as they're coming in. So that's a couple of things that we found on our journey.
Love it. An unsolicited plug for Adeption. Thanks, mate. Corey, back to you.
Yeah, so Michael, you've already had like there's several questions in the chat, but would love just to open it up. So a question that you have for Michael, feel free to put it in chat, or if you want to come off mute and share it that way, please feel free.
So Judith hasn't unmuted, so I'll just share the question that came in a little while ago from Judith Steele. How do you explore the potential contextual constraints that might be inhibiting change, or impact that might be present as a result of the company or the culture? It's kind of that environmental ecosystem that people are trying to learn and develop within. How do you handle that as a constraint or as an enabler, Michael?
Yeah, we're in this so Workday's in this real growing pain area of like, pretty young, founder led, like going after and gonna, eat the lunch of like the big competitors, to now like we're the big competitor. Everyone's trying to eat our lunch, and how you respond to that. And so like when I joined even just 5 years ago, and Judith, I asked a similar question, like, how are we thinking about change? And they said, we don't think about it, we just get stuff done. And now, like, all I hear about is like, we gotta have people to flex and be adaptable and work with other teams and everything. And so I think it's just a function of like, where we are as an organization. I'll tell you what, if anything that makes it easier is that like, we benefit from a core belief from like across the leadership line of leadership matters, development matters, and we are all in to support in any way that we can. And so leadership and involvement belief is not an issue. Second is like we have an incredibly strong values-based culture that is like key and core to everything. And so there's no compromise on that. There's no feeling of like the culture has to change. The way we have to work has to adapt, but at the heart of it, the soul of the company stays the same, right, in terms of core values. And so we can continue to pull off of that. And we're in this so you think about mantras, like we are like, simplicity scales, it's really hard to stop speed. And so, again, this gets at this whole theme of like really stripping things down, to reduce friction, help people get things done. And we're in that kind of part of the journey of that and everything. So I'm sure there's some leaders out there, even on this call, in bigger organizations. You figured out some of these things, and we're kind of right in the middle of that. So it's fun. It's fun because it's complicated, and but there's like a ton of energy around it too.
Thanks, Michael. Who else? What other questions do people have? All right, Shannon, can I put you on the spot and have you ask a question of our friend Michael here? What are you curious about?
I'm curious on what shampoo you use because your hair is glorious, my friend. Okay. I'm sorry, I had to just tackle you a little bit. Let me think. So one of the things that you said, hold on. I really like resonated. I don't know if this is a question, if this is more of just like a comment, but like I really resonated with the piece that you talked about, how somebody that's novice would do it compared to somebody who at the top would do it, and then how you fill in that gap. And so it just makes me think about how incredible that conversation could be, right? And how many different lessons could just come from that, and really developing something around the outcomes of that conversation. So I don't know. I don't really have a question around it. It just made me really think about how I might implement that in some of the things that I'm thinking about.
Yeah, well, Shannon, always great to hear from you. Hope you're doing well. I'll tell you what, like how this has turned out for us is that, so we packaged all of this information up, and so you get this opportunity when we go through a leadership development experience, and we say, okay, like read through these mental models here, and like find the challenge that you're dealing with, and like do a little self audit, more novice approach or more kind of the expert approach on this. And like inevitably everyone says like, I'm doing every single thing on this novice list, right? Like I'm expecting someone else to solve the problem. I'm complaining about these things, I'm like, take my ball and go home, whatever that may be, right? And so there's these natural tendencies that we have and everything, right? So leadership, you talked about be conscious, you have to be conscious of like what impact you're trying to have, like what outcomes are you trying to create. And so like, people get very reactive, and oftentimes that's what's falling in kind of that novice category, or they're busy and they're overwhelmed, and go down the list of things that drive you towards these more behaviors that we would see in the or ways of operating that fall into what we call the novice approach and everything. But it also then gives you like that view of like, well, how could I be thinking about this differently? And you almost don't know like to ask that question, right? Like, how could I be thinking about this differently? And so we've already asked the question. Now, that's like the good side of it. Like the tough side of it is like, that is almost immediately like any other piece of content. Like they're excited when they're there. Who knows what happens to it afterwards and everything. And so we got more opportunities to figure out like how to keep like embedding that into like more of our processes and approaches and everything, because it always like is a great way to think about like development. But that's our next opportunity to figure out how to like embed it more into like these processes and habits of our leaders.
Make it stay. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thanks, Shannon. Thanks, Michael. I've got one as well from Kim that's in the chat. I'll share unless Kim unmutes and dives in. So simple is very much on mine, the old kind of keep it simple, stupid. What are the key capabilities you're focused on, or that leaders are really asking for right now that's important for them to do what they do?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that are going on for us. So one is there's a real balancing act that we're doing between holding on to the core of our values at Workday, and then also like a real focus on performance. And that's very much like anyone in tech, like that's we're going to focus on performance, and really doing the and of that has been something that we've been focusing on. And so, there's been a lot of like system changes that we've had to respond to, and, like how do you assess performance and how do you calibrate, and really kind of questioning, a lot of what we were doing and maturing that. And all of that has required like enablement and conversations and and like ongoing communication that you have to build out and everything. And so one of the advantages to that processes that we built around more scaled manager effectiveness is that like it's adaptable to change. And so before, like we would have to take like like weeks of work to like just make updates to slides and do all this kind of stuff. And now we can like really make these changes. So that's one, is that like we've been like, you talked about basics for some in the word cloud there. Like this is like making sure people have got the basics, but like all 3,000 managers have to be like on the same page and doing that. Here's like the real tension points for us, like that we've been thinking about, also relative to your question, like geographically dispersed teams, like continues to be something that we struggle with. And like part of our struggle, I'll own this, part of my struggle is that how do you action that in a self-directed way that just doesn't come across as like basic best practices? Like we've got to like give people more like tools and actions and actually make it easier for them to do that. So that's been an interesting challenge for us. The second, and I'd say the other kind of hot topic has been around like team performance. And so as these teams are having to come together and they're struggling, that like what do they do and how do they address that? So rather than like your direct report as a team, but like project teams. And so one of the things that we're experimenting with and planning around is a version of like allow teams to self-assess, diagnose, and then provide like some solutions that they can use. And so that's another way that we're looking to address a problem with a more scaled and personalized solution.
Michael, we've heard that theme quite a bit. The piece around teaming, high performance teams, global teams, completely agree with that one. And then I want to make sure Linda asked a great question. Linda, do you want to come off mute and ask your question?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Hi. Look, from listening to everything you've talked about, it sounds like Workday have a really strong culture around learning as a whole organization and really value it. So that comes from the top right through to, the people on the receiving end of it. What about with work environments that don't have such strong cultures of learning? Because I've worked in many that actually it's a real struggle. We produce some really good stuff, but the uptake of that. So just looking for some advice or suggestions or things to do things differently to help support that.
Yeah, Linda, I really empathize, and I saw your question there. Like, I haven't worked in those environments, and so I don't know that I have a great insight into what that approach would be. When we used to more on the consulting side, when we had to work in those situations, we often started with like the senior team first, and look to build that credibility and those relationships of like what we can do or what can be accomplished with the tools and perspectives that we bring. And then inevitably the next play was, let's take this down a level now and like look to scale this and provide like a greater level of perspective there. So that's one thing that we've, like in the playbook, that we would do on the consulting side when we came into those kind of issues. And then I just think there's we've been going back to the leaders more and more, and really understanding like, what do they use, what do they need, what do they like, and so I would wonder if there are opportunities to solve problems in that space that the managers are facing with, again, with the tools and the frameworks that we bring from our discipline, and start looking to get some wins there. And so again, that's sort of like going in and spending time with those leaders, as opposed to where like we have the benefit of like you put out the signal and everyone comes and everyone joins, is that to spend more time like solving those problems that may be emerging. I would ask you, Linda, for help on that one, because I can imagine that's a tough one. I bet you got more expertise than I sure do on that one.
Yeah. You see it happen in pockets. Like we've had when a leader really backs it and you get that proactive sponsorship, it's beautiful. Like that, just the lead team get involved, they do it, and then they've become real advocates for it. If you don't, without that support, that really does diminish it quite heavily. But I do like the idea of what do they really need, what's really going to help in their environments for some of those leaders.
Yeah, one more idea too. We had I think I shared, David Rock had come and visited us, and we were just sort of idea jamming. And one of the things that he said that stuck with me was like, go really wide with just a little bit of content, and sort of like, don't try to go for like depth of experience in what you're doing. And so like feedback was an example, like what if we got like X number of people all learning about this much of feedback and trying some things and what that might look like. So that sticks with me as like an approach that I might consider in that situation of like, something that feels like a light lift, but it hits a lot of people, and see if you can get like the scale effect there that gets you some wins and some people energized about learning.
Thank you.
Love
Yeah.
that. There's a couple of little builds. Linda, certainly, I don't know if it's the same sector. I can't remember where you're based just right now, but legal, when I did work in legal sector, unless you were providing really meaningful value add coaching one-on-one to equity and fixed share partners, there's no way they would advocate it for any development for their people, because it was always chargeable hours. And so getting the leader, if as you say, when they model it and they're keen, then their teams do it. So get them to have an experience that's deeply, meaningfully developmental and hits their itches where they need scratching. The other one was that I love the shadow and support, like getting close to them and find out what's really going on. And then if you can find one hot potato, one thing that almost seems to be the scratch that everyone needs itching. And for many organizations we're coming across, it's around the how do I sustain my performance versus burning out and feeling pretty tired. And so being able to assess and provide meaningful inputs. It's a Nick Petrie research project that just a lot of organizations, the leaders are going, yes, I'm feeling tired. Could I continue this performance for the next 10 years? I don't think so. I need some help. And so if it's on that hot topic and it adds value, then it can lead to internal kind of recommendation and referral that I think is really powerful, way more than an internal team, right? If the leaders are saying, we want this, and then we love this, they listen to each other really well.
Mm-hmm.
Makes me think, Mark, a little bit about last month's topic around design thinking and really understanding what are the pain points. All right, so we just have a handful of minutes left. Would love, Jamie, I see your question and we'll post it to Michael after this session and get your response on that one. Thank you for putting it in. But would love to go to everyone, have you share in chat, what's an insight you're taking away and a potential action that you're thinking about taking based on what we talked about today with Michael? I'll prime it in the chat for you here. Thank you, Kristen. Yeah. Michael, you see some themes coming through. Simple, competition, gamification, smart brevity, good book review. All right. Mark, you want to talk a little bit about what's coming up next?
Yeah, and I see there's a wide range from the US vs New Zealand. So the in-person New Zealand one's probably, unless you fancy a work trip to New Zealand and you can get away with that, then email me. But the one that came to mind was the Grow, Perform, Sustain that I just referenced. So if anyone wants to just access the assessment, get a bit of a debrief, where the pilots went really well in Australia, the US, and over in the UK. So we're going to run a couple more in December, January time. Just private message me if that's something you want with your email address. We can make sure you're on the waiting list for the next round of that. Apart from that, it's just a huge thank you as always for all of you investing the time in yourselves, representing your organizations to make a difference back there. And Michael, of course, just, gold. You've got quotable quotes that are unmatched from any of our guests. So I'm going to be stealing those with pride and just really appreciate your time, energy and authenticity as you humbly share. Well, we don't know about that one, but this is what we're trying. So from me, just a huge thanks.
Corey. Yeah, thanks, Mark. Appreciate it.
One more question for you, Michael, before we let you go. Leave us with some words of inspiration. So what advice, motto, or saying would you put on a billboard?
On a billboard, something that's been on my mind is John Wooden, a U.S. basketball coach, said, be quick, but don't be in a hurry. And so I've been really thinking about like this idea of being quick, but not being in a hurry and being deliberate about what we do. So I'll go with be quick and don't be in a hurry.
Love it. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah,
Thanks,
my pleasure. Thanks, Corey.
Here.
Enjoy the rest of your day, your evening. Again, huge thank you, Michael. And I won't be in a hurry, but we're out of time. So enjoy the rest of your day.
Be quick about it. Thanks, everybody.